Hello and welcome to Synthetic History, where the past speaks again, but not through dusty archives or faded manuscripts. Here, we use generative AI tools to resurrect history's lost stories, forgotten places, silenced voices, and the echoes of time itself. This isn't just storytelling, it's a collaboration between human researchers and AI agents, weaving together historical fact and imagination with precision. Every episode is a bridge between what was and what could be remembered. And now, let's begin. Here's our new episode.
Imagine the weight of a crown, passed down from a legendary father to a son untested by true adversity. This was the burden on Rehoboam, the successor to the magnificent King Solomon. It was a moment pregnant with possibility for the young king, a chance to solidify a vast and prosperous empire. But one arrogant misstep, one stubborn refusal to listen to wise counsel, and a kingdom forged in the crucible of centuries and built on the promise of divine unity, simply fractured. It wasn't a slow erosion, but a sudden violent tear, leaving two distinct paths, two destinies. This is the story of the schism, the moment the united monarchy of Israel became the two warring kingdoms of Israel and Judah, a wound that would never truly heal. And as we trace this irreversible break, we search for echoes in the dusty records. Did outside forces play a hand? And how did a king's hubris irrevocably alter the course of an entire people? The stage for this catastrophic division was set in Shechem, a city steeped in Israel's ancient history, a place of covenant and renewal. The tribes of Israel had gathered there to acclaim their new king. But the people came with a grievance. Solomon's reign, for all its splendour, had been marked by heavy taxation and forced labour to fund his monumental building projects. They appealed to Rehoboam, "Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke upon us, and we will serve you." It was a plea for justice, a desperate cry from an exhausted populace. Rehoboam wisely took 3 days to consider their request. During this time, he consulted two groups of advisors. First, the elders who had served his father Solomon. Their counsel was sagacious. "If you will be a servant to this people today, and serve them, and speak good words to them when you answer them, then they will be your servants forever." They understood the art of governance, the power of compassion, the need for a king to serve his people. But Rehoboam, young and full of self-importance, rejected their seasoned wisdom. Instead, he turned to the young men who had grown up with him, his companions, eager to assert their own strength and dominance. Their advice was chillingly direct. "Thus shall you say to this people, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's loins, and now whereas my father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions.'" And so Rehoboam chose the path of arrogance. He stood before the assembled tribes and delivered the harsh, uncompromising words of his youthful advisors. It was a moment of profound miscalculation, a fatal error in judgment that would tear his kingdom asunder. The response was immediate and furious. The northern tribes, led by Jeroboam son of Nebat, cried out, "What portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Look now to your own house, David." With that defiant declaration, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel turned their backs on the Davidic dynasty, refusing to be ruled by Rehoboam. Only the tribe of Judah, and later Benjamin, remained loyal to the house of David. The united monarchy, barely 2 generations old, was utterly, irrevocably broken. Jeroboam, who had been an official under Solomon and had fled to Egypt, now returned as the chosen leader of the northern tribes. He faced an immediate dilemma: how to solidify his new kingdom. His greatest fear was that if his people continued to go to Jerusalem, the capital of Judah, to worship at the temple, their hearts would eventually turn back to Rehoboam. His solution was practical, but religiously catastrophic. He established new cult centres in the north, at the ancient sacred sites of Bethel, in the south of his territory, and Dan in the far north. And in each place he set up golden calves, proclaiming, "Behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." This act was a profound theological betrayal. It echoed the infamous golden calf incident at Mount Sinai during the Exodus, when Israel had turned from Yahweh. While perhaps not intended as outright paganism by Jeroboam, who might have seen them as pedestals for the invisible God, they quickly became objects of worship themselves, diverting the people from the true God and the central worship prescribed by the law. Jeroboam further appointed non-Levitical priests and even initiated new festivals, reshaping the very fabric of Israelite worship to suit his political agenda. The political division now had a deeply entrenched religious schism, ensuring that the two kingdoms would drift further and further apart, spiritually as well as geographically. The consequences of Jeroboam's innovations were immediate and dire, even for those who seemingly served the new king. In 1 Kings 13, a nameless man of God from Judah appears, sent by the Lord to confront Jeroboam at Bethel, prophesying against the very altar he had built. Jeroboam, enraged, stretched out his hand to seize the prophet, but his hand withered, and the altar itself split apart. While Jeroboam briefly appealed for healing, the narrative quickly shifts to the prophet's own tragic disobedience to a later divine instruction, leading to his death. This cautionary tale, inserted immediately after Jeroboam's initial sin, powerfully underscores the immediate divine displeasure with the king's religious innovations and the absolute necessity of obedience to God's word, even for prophets. It illustrates that even while establishing a new monarchy, the divine gaze remained fixed on the adherence to covenant. The ultimate judgment against Jeroboam's house, however, came through the aged prophet, Ahijah, the same prophet who had initially foretold Jeroboam's kingship while he was still an officer under Solomon. Now old and blind, Ahijah delivered a crushing prophecy to Jeroboam's wife, who had come disguised to inquire about their sick son. He declared that because Jeroboam had done more evil than all who were before him, making other gods and casting Yahweh behind his back, his entire dynasty would be utterly cut off. His house would be swept away as one sweeps away dung until it is all gone. This was a devastating condemnation, foreshadowing the relentless instability and frequent dynastic changes that would plague the northern kingdom for centuries, a stark contrast to the enduring Davidic line in Judah. But the fledgling divided kingdoms faced threats not just from within, but from without. Very soon after the division, a major regional power reasserted its dominance over Canaan. Chapter 14 of 1 Kings tells us that in the 5th year of King Rehoboam's reign, Pharaoh Shishak of Egypt came up against Jerusalem and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house. He took away everything. This biblical account is one of the most significant moments of external historical corroboration in the early Israelite monarchy. For in the great temple complex of Karnak in Egypt, etched into the Bubastite portal of the Amun temple, stands the triumphant inscription of Pharaoh Sheshonq-Tuamur, known in the Bible as Shishak. This massive relief depicts Sheshonq striking down his enemies, and alongside it, a detailed list of over 150 towns and regions he conquered during his campaign in Canaan. Crucially, this list includes not only cities in Judah, such as Gibeon and Arad, but also numerous cities in the northern kingdom of Israel, like Megiddo and Tanakh. This direct correlation between the biblical narrative and an independent contemporary Egyptian source is incredibly powerful. It confirms that shortly after the division of the kingdom, both Judah and Israel were indeed subjected to a massive Egyptian incursion. It wasn't just Jerusalem that was targeted. Sheshonq's campaign appears to have been a wide-ranging effort to reassert Egyptian influence over the Levant, taking advantage of the political fragmentation and weakness that followed Solomon's death. This historical event underscores the precarious existence of these newly formed, smaller kingdoms in a world of powerful empires. Their internal divisions made them vulnerable, and the external pressures were immense. As we look back at this pivotal moment of division, we are reminded of the fragility of unity and the profound consequences of human choices. Rehoboam's arrogance and Jeroboam's fearful expediency shattered a kingdom that, for a brief time, had known unprecedented glory and peace. The political fracture was quickly compounded by a spiritual one, creating two distinct trajectories. Judah, though often imperfect, maintained its adherence to the Davidic covenant and the Jerusalem temple. Israel, from its very beginning, embraced idolatry and political instability, ultimately leading it down a path of increasing spiritual decay and eventual destruction at the hands of Assyria. The seeds of the Omride dynasty's power and its eventual downfall were sown here, in this moment of irreversible schism, born of a king's foolishness and a nation's weary discontent. Our journey continues now to the long, complex and ultimately tragic reign of the very king whose splendour led to such great cost, Solomon.
That's it for this episode of Synthetic History. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, help us keep these forgotten voices alive by sharing the podcast on social media and with anyone who loves history told in a new way. You can find Synthetic History on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the past alive. See you in the next episode.